the weight of the keys. Aria's fingers hovered over the ivory keys, trembling slightly. The grand piano before her gleamed in the soft light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her family's opulent living room. Outside, the New York skyline stretched endlessly, a testament to ambition and dreams realized. But for Aria, that view had always felt more like a cage than a promise. At 16, Aria was already hailed as one of the most promising pianists of her generation. Her concert debuts had been met with standing ovations, her recordings praised by critics worldwide. To the outside world, she was living a dream. But as she sat on the familiar bench, the weight of expectations pressed down on her shoulders, heavier than any piece of music she'd ever played. Again, from the top, her mother's voice cut through the silence, sharp and unyielding. And this time, try to feel the music, Aria. It's Chopin, not a mathematical equation. Aria bit back a sigh and repositioned her hands. As she began to play, the haunting melody of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the room. Her fingers danced across the keys with practiced precision, each note perfect and clear. But even as she played, Aria could sense her mother's dissatisfaction. "Stop, stop!" she interrupted, her voice tinged with frustration. "Where is the emotion? Where is the passion? You play like a machine, Aria. Is this how you plan to perform at Carnegie Hall next month?" Aria's hands fell into her lap, her eyes fixed on the keys. "I'm trying, Mom. I really am." Her mother's expression softened slightly. She moved to sit beside her daughter on the bench, placing a hand on Aria's shoulder. "I know you are, sweetheart, but trying isn't enough. You have a gift, a responsibility to share it with the world. Do you know how many people would kill for your talent?" Aria nodded silently, the familiar guilt washing over her. She knew her parents had sacrificed everything for her career, moving from their small town to New York, spending every spare penny on lessons and instruments. How could she tell them that sometimes she dreamed of being just a normal teenager? That she longed for sleepovers and school dances, for the luxury of making mistakes and not having them dissected by critics and teachers alike? "Let's take a break," her mother said, standing up. "Practice your scales for a while. I'll be back in an hour and we'll try the Chopin again." As her footsteps faded away, Aria let out a long breath. She began the familiar routine of scales, her fingers moving automatically while her mind wandered. Through the window, she could see a group of kids her age walking down the street, laughing and pushing each other playfully. A lump formed in her throat. Just then, her phone buzzed with a text. Glancing quickly at the door to make sure her mother wasn't returning, Aria pulled it out. It was from her best and only friend, Zoe. "Midnight movie marathon still on for tonight?" Aria's heart leapt. For weeks, she and Zoe had been planning this sleepover, timed perfectly to coincide with her parents' overnight trip to Boston for a charity gala. It would be her first real sleepover, a taste of normal teenage life. "Absolutely," she typed back, a smile spreading across her face. "Can't wait." As she tucked her phone away and returned to her scales, Aria felt a flutter of excitement. For one night, she could pretend to be just another girl, with no recitals or competitions looming over her. The rest of the day passed in a blur of practice and lessons. By the time her parents left for their trip, Aria's head ached from the constant criticism. But as she waved goodbye to their taxi, all she could think about was the night ahead. Zoe arrived an hour later, arms laden with snacks and DVDs. "Ready for a night of junk food and terrible horror movies?" She grinned. For the next few hours, Aria felt like she could breathe for the first time in years. They laughed at cheesy jump scares, argued over plot holes, and ate more popcorn than Aria had been allowed in her entire life. As the clock ticked past midnight and they started their third movie, Aria found herself wishing the night would never end. But reality has a way of intruding, even in the most perfect moments. Halfway through the film, Aria's phone lit up with a news alert. Still giggling from a particularly ridiculous scene, she glanced at it absently. Then her blood ran cold. "Rising star Aria Chen to replace ailing pianist at tomorrow's charity concert," the headline read. "Aria? What's wrong?" Zoe asked, noticing her friend's sudden pallor. With shaking hands, Aria read the article aloud. The pianist scheduled to perform at tomorrow's Boston charity gala, the very one her parents were attending, had fallen ill, and somehow Someone had volunteered Arya to take his place. But I can't, Arya stammered, panic rising in her chest. I'm not prepared. I don't have anything ready for a full concert, and my parents, oh God, they're going to kill me when they find out I'm not practicing right now. Zoe reached out, squeezing her friend's hand. Hey, breathe. It's going to be okay. You're amazing, Arya. You could play chopsticks and people would still give you a standing ovation. But Arya barely heard her. Her mind was racing, calculating the hours left until the concert, the pieces she could potentially pull together in that time. The magical bubble of normalcy she'd been living in for the past few hours burst, reality crashing back in with brutal force. I have to practice, she said, standing up abruptly. I'm so sorry, Zoe. I have to. Zoe's face fell, but she nodded in understanding. It's okay. I get it. Do you want me to stay? Maybe I could help somehow? Arya shook her head, already moving towards the piano. No, I need to focus. I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you, I promise. As Zoe gathered her things and left, casting worried glances back at her friend, Arya sat down at the piano. The keys that had always been her solace now looked like a battlefield. With a deep breath, she began to play. Hours passed. The sun rose, painting the sky in brilliant hues of pink and gold, but Arya barely noticed. Her fingers moved ceaselessly, running through arpeggios and pieces she had memorized years ago. When her parents burst through the door, frantic with worry and excitement, they found her exactly where she'd been all night, at the piano, playing as if her life depended on it. In a way, it did. As she was whisked away to Boston, fitted for a gown and pushed onto the stage of a packed concert hall, Arya felt like she was moving through a dream. The applause washed over her like a wave, but all she could think about was the text from Zoe she'd seen just before going on stage. You've got this, but when it's over, we need to talk about what you want. As Arya's fingers touched the keys for the opening notes of her performance, a small spark of rebellion ignited in her heart. She would play tonight. Yes, she would make her parents proud and fulfill her obligations. But after this, it was time to start writing her own melody. The music began, and for the first time in years, Arya played not for the critics, not for her parents, but for herself. And in that moment, she finally understood what her mother had meant about feeling the music, because for the first time, she truly did.